them at a late date. No creativity required. Libraries, that close but quirky cousins of schools, take up a unique quadrant in our children's educational experience because they are, after all, places where young people often go to experiment with pursuits and ideas that may seem out of place elsewhere. But again, more on this later. That was also foreshadowing. Great. It is stories that I advocate for. Books are important, but respect for story is more important. I am consistently relieved when I walk into a school or town library and see entire walls of the young adult section dedicated to manga and graphic novels. I haven't met a single librarian yet who hasn't confessed that these sections are the absolute busiest and the most in demand by young readers. And I can't say I blame young readers. After a school day where I'm worried about grades, the girls I fancy, and the enormous amount of hormones flooding my body, I'm not exactly going to settle in for an evening of reading Tolstoy recreationally. I want simplicity and fun. Manga and comics have that down, and I'm a guy who read and loved Hamlet at the age of 10. I'm pretty freaking literate. But the reading list from the last 2 weeks of my adult life has been, I kid you not, Teen Titans Volume 1, Fates and Furies by Lauren Groff, which is a novel that's just been nominated for the National Book Award in America and is getting a lot of critical noise, Batman and Robin Volume 5, Link Hack, which is a manga, Simply Nigella by Nigella Lawson, A Brief History of Seven Killings by Marlon James, which just won the Man Booker, and A School of Blue Thread by Anne Tyler, also shortlisted for the Man Booker. All of those titles, bar one, by the way, I got from my local library. For those who are interested, I purchased Simply Nigella because a new cookbook by Miss Lawson just has to be purchased in our household. I'm afraid of the law. So there we go, 50-50 comic books and other literary contemporary content. Stories are stories. To say some stories aren't as legitimate as others is like saying country music or rap music isn't music, or gluten-free food isn't actual food. It's a sign of an ignorant and unintelligent snob. It's also a really quick way to offend or permanently hurt someone who is a fan of the subject of your derision. Rule 2, apparently I'm making rules. Don't shame a young person for their curiosity or their pleasure. Don't shame a young person for their curiosity or their pleasure. Shame, wielded by an authoritative hand, creates lifelong scars. And you can bet, if they have the option, they won't be interacting with the institution that you symbolise for possibly the rest of their lives. And awfully, they will turn into parents who steal their children away from your institution. It only takes one snobbish dismissal to turn away a generation or two from the library. When I met that librarian who casually dismissed that wall of comic books, I could see why they weren't online, or why that particular corner of her library was entirely absent. Stories are stories, and I think we can all agree that anything that gets young people reading is a good thing. And libraries take up this particular special square because it was in libraries that I read naughty things that I weren't allowed to read. It was in libraries that I went and read in private a book about sexual anatomy because I wanted to know what a urethra was. If you'd like to know, I can tell you after. Thank you, local library. It was libraries that I found Doctor Who, which opened up a whole new television series, and sci-fi that led me to Isaac Asimov and Douglas Adams and Ursula Le Guin and Margaret Atwood that led me further down the line. If we just start on the right step, then they do open the doors. So, I was shamed for my pleasure by my peers upon arriving at high school. My peers wanted to answer this question of who was I by responding with, "You're a nerd, David," or "a loser." So I'd like to tell you a little bit about my time at high school. Let's cut to day 5 of year 8, because back in Queensland, we used to start high school in year 8. So this is my 5th day of high school. And I am across a visual arts table, and a young gentleman by the name of Cameron has me by the neck, kind of leaning over me, and he sneers into my face, "I could snap you like a twig." Now, Cameron had no identity crisis going on. Cameron knew exactly who he was. He had spiky hair, and he wore shorts down here, and he never tucked his shirt in, and he didn't wear a hat at lunchtime. So he was captain, I know. If you say that to a school group, they go, "Oh my God." It's a big deal. So he was the bully. But Cameron was the closest relationship I had in high school at that time. We conversed every day. True, it was a conversation about what an idiot I was, but we conversed every day. Now, we were in this position, him leaning over me, him saying I could snap you like a twig, because in fairness I called him an idiot. But I called him an idiot because he called me a naughty word starting with F and ending with agate. He said that, and I'd said idiot, and he'd gone right across the table. Now, he was the closest relationship I had, except for another young man. First day of high school, I'm standing, trying very desperately not to get anybody's attention, when I hear a voice from behind me go, "Do you like cheese?" Just like that. And I turn around, and it's this young man, also in Year 8. He's got greasy, messy hair tied up in a ponytail. He's got clothes that look like they've been thrown on him from about 3 blocks away. They're all too different. And he's got a backpack in which he apparently has put every book known to man, kind of weighing him down closer to the ground. This is Ray. And I answer Ray's question, "Do you like cheese?" with an honest but cautious yes. And then he talks at me for 5 to 10 minutes about cheese. Once he's done with cheese, he moves on to his next topic, which is Pokemon. He talks to me about, at that time, all 150 Pokemon. Now there are 6 billion of them. After Pokemon, he moves on to his next topic, which is reciting every single line from every single movie that involves Austin Powers or Mike Myers. He can recite every single line at the top of his head. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, I go, "Ray, you're a bit special, aren't you?" And I'm able to recognise instantly that Ray has Asperger's syndrome or autism. Now, I'm able to diagnose that because I've grown up with 2 younger brothers who have Asperger's syndrome or autism. Now, ordinarily when I'm talking to kids, I explain what Asperger's syndrome or autism is. However, I feel like there's a communal understanding about what that is. It's a social or communicative disorder that often leads to a feeling of isolation and an inability to read people's reactions in real time. And as custodians of libraries, we probably have a lot of autistic or people with Asperger's hanging out in your library because they're quiet places, they're places with a predictable routine, and there are places where they can go and pursue their obsessions. Because the other thing about people with autism or Asperger's is that they have an incredible capacity for memory. And their obsessive-compulsive disorder kind of part of them allows them to latch onto subjects that they're incredibly passionate about. So a large group of people at NASA have been diagnosed with Asperger's or autism. We know now, in retrospect, that a lot of geniuses through the ages have probably exhibited behaviours of Asperger's or autism. You read about biographies of Beethoven or Einstein, we can kind of recognise that in them. My brothers, Andy and Chrissy, who are 2 years younger than me and twins, can recite off the top of their head to this day every single line of every single episode of Friends, every single line of every single episode of Thomas the Tank Engine, every single line of every single episode of Family Guy, a lot of episodes of South Park, and some episodes of The Simpsons. More than that, they reach into this dialogue as a means of expressing themselves. So these pop culture stories are in fact the way that they communicate how they're feeling, and did for a long time as young people. So from under the age of 10, if Andy and Chrissy were having a fight, Andy would not be able to say, Andy would not have the brain function to go into his brain and summon up the emotive language of "bugger off, Chrissy, you're frustrating me." Instead, he would take on the personality of Homer Simpson, become Homer Simpson yelling at Bart in the exact intonation with all the mannerisms that he can interpret of Homer, which is quite funny to watch. But it's also quite alarming when you realise that this is how they communicate. So I grew up in a house that I shared with Peter and Stewie Griffin, and Homer Simpson, and Colin Lane and Frank Woodley, and Thomas the Tank Engine and the Fat Controller, which was an enchanting experience. But also told me a lot about how stories for some people are literally the modes of communication, are literally the metaphor that they reach for in order to communicate what is going on inside their heads. And it's something that we all do, naturally. It's just for people with autism or Asperger's, that's how they lean on. And in fact, stories are the modes of education that teach us how to interact with the world. It's just that for some people we can interpret that through a filter of metaphor or figurativeness, but we do this as young people. When we see someone we really like Miley Cyrus or Justin Bieber or Tyler Oakley or the Vault Brothers or PewDiePie or any of these people that young people really look up to, we want to wear their personality. I wanted to be the Doctor. That's who I wanted to be. He was perfect. He was quirky, he was funny. He had a lot of young women around him constantly kind of looking up to him, but there was no kind of pressure to be sexual. I was like, great, I can be that guy. And I wanted to be that guy. That's how I communicated and framed my experience of the world. But growing up with the boys meant a couple of interesting experiences. For example, we're running around the backyard as 6 or 8 year olds playing like we usually do. Right, a bit more enthusiastically than that, you know what I mean? And when all of a sudden Chrissy lies down, gone. Nothing going on in his eyes. He's breathing, his eyes are open, Andy and I are standing over him going, hello, nothing. We rush inside. Mum, Chrissy's dead. Mum goes, I should check this out. We go into the backyard. No response. Mum goes, yep, this is weird. Rushes inside, rings the doctor. Doctor says, yes, you should bring him in. We run, poor Mum, like Dad's at work, she bundles 3 kids into an ambulance, the sirens, the whole works, right? Possible neurological damage of an Asperger's child, no cause for concern. Run into the hospital, doctor's going, yeah, this is weird, I'll be back in a tick. The second the doctor leaves the room, Chrissy's up again playing. Like nothing's happened. And Mum and I go, Chrissy, what? What just happened now? What? Nothing. No, Chrissy, you were knocked out like an hour. What happened? Oh, he said, oh, I was Superman affected by kryptonite. His commitment to the role was stunning. He had exactly the same reaction you did, which was... And I said, get in the car. This is the boys. The line between stories and reality is blurred, and they're a constant reminder of how fragile that line is, particularly when you're young. You are in such a mode of sponge kind of absorption of the stories you're being told that you take them on, and they inform your experience of the world, which is another point I'll get to later. That's for sure. I'll tell you one more story because I've got the time, and it involves I don't get to tell this story to young people because some schools don't like it. We're older now, 13, 15, and we're constantly trying to get the boys to improve their life skills, their ability to interact with the world. So we're in Woolworths and Mum says to Chrissy, Chris, can you go up to the deli counter and just ask for about 500 grams of leg ham because we need that for sandwiches, right? Chrissy goes, no worries. Up he goes to the Woolworths counter, sees a young lady behind the counter, and he goes, ah, pretty young lady, in his mind. Pretty young lady. I want to impress this pretty young lady. What should I do? To impress pretty young ladies, you make them laugh. How can I make them laugh? I'll go through this tremendous library of pop culture knowledge and lines in my head and pick out a one that I think that would be both socially appropriate and would make the young lady laugh at this particular point. So the young lady says, what would you like? And he says, hi, can I have a dozen chicken vaginas, please? That's a line from Family Guy. The confused 14-year-old goes, we don't have chicken vaginas. And I run over at this point and go, I'm sorry, and split them up. Because something weird happened at around 12 or 13, which was I started getting embarrassed. Because something clicks over when you're 12 or 13. Before that, they'd been my quirky younger brothers, and I kind of understood, and we were friends, and I hung out with them and played with them. When I was 12 or 13, I became consumed with how I fit in, and wanted to be normal. So any part of my life that I didn't think was normal, or was a bit too difficult to explain, I started putting distance between. And that meant that I grew distant from my brothers, which, when they entered their troublesome and very difficult adolescence. This is all rather getting away from the fact that Cameron had me by the neck across the visual arts table. So, Cameron had me by the neck across the visual arts table, and he sneers into my face, I could snap you like a twig. And I said, yes, you probably could, which was not the answer he was expecting. At this point, the teacher on the other side of the room, who is she's a first-year teacher out of uni, and she's thinking in her head, I'm choosing the wrong career. She manages to yell out something, and Cameron kind of backs away as a confused gorilla, and he says, I'll get you at lunchtime, Burton. And at lunchtime, I run away with Ray to the library, and we talk about Pokemon in the library. Which is good, because Cameron didn't know what a library was. And that was pretty much year 8. That was pretty much my first year of high school. My world changed in year 9 when I discovered drama. Drama was like manna from heaven. It was fantastic. And something happened in my first drama class where we were improvising, we were making a scene up on the spot, where I took a risk and I got up